Thank you so much, Ambassador, for talking to us. And Doha talks, I'm pretty sure following the peace talks, it has started. And overall, what's your thoughts about the peace talks process? It's taking too long, and the level of violence also didn't decrease.
Yeah. So thank you, Zheela. For the Doha peace talks, and have the announcement now they're going to resume on January the 5th. You know, looking at the Doha peace talks to date, some positives. First of all, for the Afghan people, you know, the government of Afghanistan and the Taliban are continuing the peace talks, albeit very slowly and sometimes fitfully, but that's a positive that at least they're continuing. The second, from a US perspective very much, is that our force reductions are continuing. So next month, by the end of next month, 2021, there's an expectation that US troop levels will be down to 2,500. That's down from 9 years before that at 100,000. In fact, if it gets down to 2,500, that's going to be the lowest level of US troops inside of Afghanistan since December of 2001, shortly after the US intervened after 9/11. Some negatives, though. The big negative is that the levels of violence in Afghanistan remain high. Taliban attacks continue. And then there's three, I think, big uncertainties about the peace talks, which leave a question mark in everyone's mind about whether these will succeed or not. First of all, will the Taliban actually come through with its commitment to not allow international terrorist groups to operate inside of Afghanistan? Secondly, what's the framework for power sharing between the Taliban and the government of Afghanistan? And will the Taliban respect human rights? And then third, a major uncertainty is what will be the enforcement mechanism for any peace agreement that is reached between the Taliban and the government of Afghanistan. Outside support and enforcement mechanisms be needed and have to be credible.
Also, you followed up in November, international world, including US pledge aid to Afghanistan. And do you think this support will help Afghanistan to reach a political solution and speed up this peace process and a settlement?
Well, last month there was an international donors conference in Geneva, and some 60 countries pledged $12 billion of support for Afghanistan over the next 4 years. That's not as much as at the Tokyo conference in 2012, when there was $16 billion of support offered, and it's less than the Brussels conference in 2016, in which $15 billion of support was offered. Still, and this is still significant, though. $12 billion is a lot of money. About 50% of Afghanistan's budget comes from international assistance, so it's critical. I think at the level of support that has been offered, even though it's lower than in previous years, still sufficient to provide the government of Afghanistan the assurance of support it needs in its approach to negotiations with the Taliban, gives them confidence. Secondly, I think it also indicates to the Taliban that it doesn't command such international support, of course, as the legitimate government of Afghanistan. The final point is that increasingly international donor support has been conditioned upon a clear commitment of the government of Afghanistan to increase transparency and to fight corruption within its government. And I think that this is something that President Ashraf Ghani wants to continue to do, and in a sense, that conditionality gives him more leverage in his own efforts to bring reform to the government of Afghanistan.
You briefly mentioned about U.S. troops reduction. What's your thoughts about U.S. presence in Afghanistan, and let's say beyond reduction of troops, how effective will be U.S. presence in Afghanistan and how it will help with the situation there or supporting Afghan government?
Well, the government of the United States and the United States military still providing critical support to the Afghan National Security Forces, the main effort with the Afghan National Army and the Afghan National Police. And beyond providing capabilities and combat support, it's providing about $4 billion a year of security assistance. Foreign aid from the United States in recent years has dropped. When I was the ambassador in Afghanistan at the height of President Obama's so-called surge, the US foreign aid budget to Afghanistan in 2010, for an example, was over $4 billion a year. Now it's down to 600 million, but it's still very significant. So it's important in terms of military capabilities and expertise that the United States Armed Forces is bringing to bear and to the level of resources that we're committed to. These are being steadily reduced, as we know, hopefully though in a manner in which, as US and international assistance is lowered, that Afghan organic capabilities, its institutions and its economy are continuing to develop in more sustainable ways. If you ask the question, yeah.
Yes, perfect. With the incoming administration, you briefly mentioned also about the new administration led with President-elect Biden. Do you expect any big change for Afghanistan policy? And do you think it's a wise time to remove all the troops from Afghanistan by May 2021 as it initially planned?
Yeah, several points about the Biden administration, Zheela. First is that we know that as Vice President Biden, he was skeptical of very ambitious state nation building efforts. And so in this regard, I think that he shares President Trump's view, arguing for a more narrowly counterterrorism campaign by the United States and allies inside of Afghanistan. So the important question, I think, that President Biden will face after inauguration is how great is the international terrorist threat? And if it's his assessment is it's significant and will get greater without US presence, then I think he will be persuaded to try to keep some troops and capabilities inside of Afghanistan. But the challenge is the Taliban position is very clear, no US troops. So that's going to provide a challenge for the Biden administration. The Biden administration is going to be much more focused on great power competition, China, Russia, than it has been in the past with regard to counterinsurgency, counterterrorism. Final point is that the defense and military team under President Biden, if General Lloyd Austin, retired Army Lieutenant General Lloyd Austin, is confirmed as Secretary of Defense, he brings into that position a vast experience inside of Afghanistan, Iraq, and is the Central Command commander for the entire region. As well, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, General Milley also has extensive operational experience in Afghanistan and Iraq. I say this because their two voices bring a lot of experience and informed judgments to the table. And I think that President Biden will tend to at least give them a fair hearing.
Many experts are concerned on the length of these peace talks. What the U.S. has to do to push the peace talks to, let's say, strong settlement and taking less time and also impacting the level of violence by the Taliban?
Yeah, it's a difficult problem. In the absence of a political agreement between the government of Afghanistan and the Taliban, I think that lowering levels of violence will prove very difficult. And it's a challenge for the government of Afghanistan as US and international support diminishes, because the cost of maintaining conventional army and police forces and these large organizations is considerable. And if you're on the insurgent side, it's not as costly to maintain insurgent forces in the field. So what's going to be very important is not only the answer to the question, how much support is the United States willing to give militarily to the Afghan National Security Forces for how much time? And increasingly important is what will the regional actors around Afghanistan that are important and the major powers do to bring pressure to bear on the Taliban in order to get them to the table and to agree to a peace deal that can be sustained.
You've answered my other question on how Taliban would be pressured to denounce the relation with the terrorist groups. Because according to the agreement in February, Taliban agreed that they will cut ties, let's say with Al-Qaeda, but they never cut ties. So at the same time, also Pakistan in support of the Taliban of saying that reduction of violence is not only responsibility of the Taliban. So then who's the main aggressor here? Are they referring to international forces or ANA? What's your thoughts about it?
The question of whether the Taliban has cut links with Al-Qaeda. UN analysts, US intelligence agencies, government of Afghanistan intelligence agencies are very clear that there's still robust communications that exist between the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. The degree of coordination, operational coordination that goes on between Al-Qaeda and Taliban, that's not clear, although what is known is that several very senior Al-Qaeda leaders and operatives have been killed in recent months in areas that are under the control of the Taliban. Taliban and Al-Qaeda, they have a relationship that goes back 25 years. And it would be unrealistic to expect that that relationship will be broken overnight, or will be broken in a month, or will be broken in a year. Taliban leaders, they share an ideology with Al-Qaeda and they benefit from the expertise that Al-Qaeda brings to them and the finances that they bring. But on the other hand, I think the Taliban leaders are very clear that their linkages with Al-Qaeda, which will be known, which are known, if those continue and they become operational, then that's going to severely limit the degree of international support that the Taliban enjoys. And the Taliban knows from its history that that lack of international support can be fatal. With regard to Pakistan, Pakistan has been supportive of the peace talks. In fact, as you know, when the Doha Agreement was signed between the United States and Taliban in February of this year, that Pakistan Foreign Minister Qureshi was actually at the table. I think that Pakistan has two goals right now, two primary goals. One is they don't want the sudden collapse of the security situation in Afghanistan. They know from the 1980s and from the 1990s that the penalties that they pay for that environment. The second, though, is that they want a deal in which Taliban has sufficient power within a reconstituted Afghan government that it would be very sympathetic to Islamabad's security interest. Now, that doesn't mean that Islamabad wants a Taliban victory, but they do want Taliban influence in a new government of Afghanistan. But at the end of the day, my own time in the region, my own time in Afghanistan working with Pakistan, leads me to conclude that until the Pakistan army unequivocally withdraws its support from terrorist groups committed to imposing their own extremist version of rule over parts of Afghanistan, then I remain skeptical that Pakistan will ultimately be part of the solution, but instead will continue to play the role of spoiler.